according to mine.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus went on with his disciples to the villages of Caesarea Philippi. And on the way he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They answered him, "John the Baptist, and others, Elijah, still others, one of the prophets." He asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" He answered them, "You are the Messiah." And he sternly ordered them not to tell anyone about him. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all this quite openly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, he rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan! You are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." He called the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Come, Holy Spirit, and anoint my lips, and anoint our ears, that your word may be spoken and heard, and Jesus Christ glorified here in our midst. Amen. Well, firstly, I want to say thank you to you all for braving the weather and coming out today. And if you read in the bulletin, Emily was supposed to be preaching this morning, and I said to her, let's hold off till next week for your sermon so that not only do you get to preach to all of St. John's, but all of St. John's gets to hear you and to participate with you as we have participated with you through the course of your internship. So Emily will be here with us next week preaching, and so I'm preaching this morning. So the question I have for you is, why are you a Christian? I could also add, why are you an Episcopalian? I could even probably add, why are you here this morning and not somewhere else? Maybe a Presbyterian church or a Methodist church or a synagogue or somewhere else. We come back to the question, why are you a Christian? The answer for me is very simple. It's also why I'm an Episcopalian. It's because my mother was. I was raised with a Christian mother who went to the Anglican Church in New Zealand. I went with her. I was an 8 o'clocker, went and did communion every Sunday, was an altar boy, did all of that kind of stuff. So I'm a Christian and I'm an Episcopalian because my mother was. But if you were to ask me that question also, though, that's actually not really why. I think the important question really is not why am I a Christian, but why do I stay a Christian? Why do I stay a Christian? And that's kind of the frame that Jesus is working with the disciples this morning in the gospel. He asked the question, who do you say that I am? People are saying, well, you're John the Baptist, Elijah, one of the prophets, all of these different people. But then Jesus comes back with the question, but who do you say that I am? It's not about what you've been taught about Jesus that's important. It's who do you say that Jesus is? Because if it's simply just because my mother was a Christian, then I actually don't necessarily believe in Jesus. I believe in my mother, what she taught me. Or it could be, well, that was the church that I went to. And at some point, I think we have to make it personal. That it's not just simply an issue of what has the church taught you. Because then you would simply believe in the church rather than in Jesus. So the big question this morning, I think, is who do you say that Jesus is? And that for each one of us, at some point in our life, we need to own the faith that has been passed on to us by others, by people in the church, by family, friends. At some point, we need to personally own our own faith and belief in Jesus. Now, in the Anglican Episcopal Church, in one sense, we have a rite of passage. It's called confirmation, in which about 8th graders, 12 years old, 13-year-olds get to make that decision. And sometimes for some of those children it does happen. I was confirmed about that age, and all I can say is I have no idea what the heck they were talking about. And I have only one little memory of that whole experience, and I wouldn't say it was an overly positive memory. And it wasn't actually until I was away from home and in college that, yes, I was doing the habit that I had been taught by my mother. I was going to church while I was a student at college. And I was about 21, a whole bunch of upheaval in my life. And I wanted to know who Jesus was. I wanted to know about God. Not just read about God in a book. I wanted to know God personally. I could read stories about other people having their experience of God, and it's like, fine, I want my own. And even though I hadn't come to the States, in some ways I think I'm from Missouri. It's like, I got to have it myself. I've got to show me. I want my own experience. And I know that experience took place over a period of time while I was in college, probably around about a year. But during that year, there were specific points in which I made a decision to follow Jesus. The first experience was actually an Easter Eve service. The whole church is dark and you walk in and all of sort of the mystery and the awe, the wonder, but just aware of the darkness and the light coming into it. But what really captured my heart that night was the preacher, Peter Phillips, an Anglican priest from England who was working in New Zealand. And what he said in his sermon was, he talked about the resurrection. What did the resurrection mean? It meant that Jesus was alive and walking the streets of Auckland, New Zealand. That Jesus was accessible and available to me just as he was to the disciples 2,000 years before. And I wouldn't say at that point did I actually meet him, but I knew that he was accessible. And over the course of the next weeks and months, I would say I began to experience the reality of Jesus in my life. And coming to that point in which the question was made, will I follow Jesus? And I can remember singing the song, I have decided to follow Jesus. Some of you may have heard it. I would say it was the hardest song that I had ever sung in my life. In some ways, I have a love-hate relationship with that song. But it was a decision that what my life was about was to follow Jesus. Which brings us back in some ways to the gospel, because we see Peter, and Peter says to, when Jesus says, but it's okay, all these other people are saying something about me, but who do you say that I am? And Peter says, you are the Messiah. And Jesus says to Peter, wow, this isn't something you just came up with on your own. This is something that was inspired by the Spirit within you. And I can just imagine Peter going, I know who he is. I know who he is. I've got to figure it out. And then the very next words, Jesus says the implications of what it means to be a Messiah. That I'm probably going to be put to death. And Peter will have no part of that. He wants to protect his Messiah. And so what does Jesus? Looks at him and he says, get behind me, Satan! And you can see Peter becoming incredibly confused. What is going on here? And a big part of what Peter is learning over and over and over again is exactly the nature of Messiah. What does it mean, the Messiah? And the challenge that Peter has is that Peter believes the Messiah will come out of the house of David. Think about King David. What was he? He was a military warrior. And Peter is looking for a military Messiah who will boot the Romans out of Israel. That was his expectation. That was his hope. He had no idea, and you actually see over and over again when Jesus would talk to Gentiles, Peter would get upset and crazy stuff would happen because he believed that Messiah was for the Israelites. And so when I think of my own personal life, I decided to follow Jesus. Despite what the world does, and that there would be no turning back. But what I've discovered is over and over again, I need to continually come to a fresh understanding of what exactly Jesus is about. And we see this later in the gospel for this morning. It's very easy to spend our time praying that Jesus would change stuff out there in the world. Particularly the bad stuff. And I think miss the whole point. This crazy thing. Think particularly of World War I and World War II, right? You had Germans fighting the English, and then the Americans joined in with both those things. You had faithful people in both countries praying to the same God that God would give them the victory. And it can't happen like that. Something's not going to work there. Because what this Messiah comes to do, well, we keep pondering this. We want Jesus on our side. We want Jesus on our side. And we miss the crucial point there. The question is, are we on Jesus' side? It's not about getting God to bless our plan. And I think that was the big challenge for me. I had a plan. I knew what I was going to do. In fact, this plan had motivated me actually since I was just a little kid. I had fallen in love with the sound of an unmuffled, big, huge engine going real fast. It still does, actually. It calls to me if I hear like an unmuffled V8 or a high screaming motorbike engine. It just calls the insides of me. I've got to go find it. But I had heard that sound when I was a little kid, and I followed it. It took me all the way through high school. I was valedictorian in my high school, motivated by this desire. Went off to university, become an engineer. And I was going to go build race cars in England. That was my plan. That wasn't Jesus' plan. But it's not just about some of those big plans. Through the course of my life as a priest, it is still the same question. Am I wanting God to bless my plan? Am I wanting God to bless my plan for St. John's, for example? Or am I continually being open to what is Jesus' plan for St. John's? So that this idea of following Jesus isn't just simply about getting God to do what we think we want God to do, but as being continually open to the Spirit at work within us. And that the kingdom of God that Jesus came to proclaim, it's not an external worldly kingdom. It's the kingdom of hearts that continually choose to follow Jesus, to continually be open to God's love, God's truth, God's compassion, and being willing to share that love and that compassion with others. And it really requires a daily choosing. Not just a one-shot deal, but a daily choosing to follow Jesus and to continually be asking, Jesus, have I got this right today? Or is there something more that you're trying to teach me? Amen.